While most of us panic buy toilet paper at the first sign of trouble, the Amish community quietly goes about their business, unfazed by what is coming. But what if the grid really goes down and a collapse is waiting around the corner? How would the Amish be able to thrive while you are barely surviving? Let's find out. Let's start with food production, the cornerstone of survival. When chaos breaks out and the grid goes down, most of us will be racing to empty grocery store shelves like it's Black Friday on steroids. Within days, those shelves will be as bare as a politician's promises, and that's where reality hits hard. We've forgotten how to feed ourselves. Meanwhile, the Amish are kicking back in their fields, business as usual. They've got something most of us traded away generations ago, real farming knowledge passed down through families. We're talking about people who can look at a cloud formation and know exactly when to plant their corn. While we're Googling how to grow tomatoes, they're already harvesting their third crop of the season. Their farms are like perfectly tuned machines, but without any actual machines. Every piece works together in harmony. The horses aren't just transportation, they're living tractors that fertilize the fields while they work. Those chickens scratching around the yard, they're not just for fresh eggs, they're pest control, fertilizer producers, and garden tillers all rolled into one feathered package. The average Amish farm is a masterclass in efficiency. A single acre in their hands produces enough food to feed several families, and they do it without ever firing up a tractor or opening a bag of chemical fertilizer. Their methods might seem old-fashioned, but there's nothing outdated about results. While modern farms depend on a complex web of fuel deliveries, replacement parts, and computer diagnostics, an Amish farmer just needs his horses, his knowledge, and his community. Speaking of community, that's their secret weapon. When's the last time you helped your neighbor harvest their crop? For the Amish, it's just another Tuesday. They pool their labor, share their tools, and make sure nobody goes hungry. It's like they've been preparing for a crisis their whole lives without even trying. But having plenty of fresh food is just the beginning. What happens when winter comes knocking? Well, that's where things get really interesting. When the grid goes down, your freezer full of microwave dinners isn't going to save you. While most of us will be helplessly watching our food spoil, the Amish will be calmly accessing their time-tested storage systems. Food storage might sound about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it's the difference between feasting and fasting when winter rolls around. Most of us think we're pretty clever with our basement full of canned goods from Costco, but what happens when those run out? You can't exactly run to the store for more when society's gone sideways. The Amish, though, they've turned food preservation into an art form. Their smokehouses are like time machines for meat, transforming today's pork into next year's dinner. The smell of hickory smoke drifting across an Amish farm isn't just pleasant, it's the aroma of security. A well-smoked ham can last months without refrigeration, which is pretty handy when the power grid's about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Then there's their root cellars, nature's refrigerator and the original energy-efficient appliance. These underground storage rooms maintain a steady temperature year-round, hovering around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Your fancy smart fridge might be able to order groceries, but can it keep potatoes fresh for 6 months without electricity? Didn't think so. The Amish approach to food preservation is like having multiple backup plans for your backup plans. Salt curing, pickling, fermenting, water bath canning, they've mastered them all. While we're wondering if that jar of pickles in the back of our fridge is still good, they're rotating through their preserved food with the precision of a military operation. But here's what's really impressive. Nothing goes to waste. Those cabbage leaves that look too rough for coleslaw, they're perfect for sauerkraut. Bruised apples, into the cider press they go. Even the whey left over from cheese making gets used to pickle vegetables. It's like they're playing a never-ending game of food Tetris, and they're getting perfect scores. Now, you might be wondering how they manage all this without being connected to the power grid. Well, that's where things get even more interesting. No electricity doesn't mean what you think it does in Amish communities. Sure, they're not binge-watching Netflix or posting selfies on Instagram, but they've got their own clever ways of harnessing power. Remember when your phone dies and you feel like you're living in the Stone Age? The Amish are over here living in 1823 and 2024 at the same time. Let's talk about their solar game. While the rest of us are fumbling with complicated grid tie systems, the Amish have been quietly mastering off-grid setups for decades. Their solar panels might look basic, but they're about as reliable as sunrise itself. And those batteries they use, they're not storing power for the latest gaming console. They're keeping essential tools and equipment running smooth as butter. The real genius is in how they use their electricity. Every watt has a purpose. No power wasted on charging 20 devices you don't need or keeping that second fridge running in the garage just for extra soda. They're strategic about it, using electricity for workshop tools, dairy equipment, and safety lighting. It's like they're running their own miniature power companies, minus the monthly bills and random outages. But solar isn't their only trick. Those picturesque windmills aren't just for show. They're pulling their weight in the power department. And don't forget about water power. Some Amish communities have rigged up water wheels that would make your high school physics teacher proud. The best part? These systems don't need a degree in electrical engineering to maintain. When something breaks, they fix it themselves, usually with parts you could find in any decent workshop. Here's a mind bender. Did you know some Amish communities can generate enough power to run a small manufacturing operation? We're not talking about charging a phone here. We're talking about running actual machinery. The difference is they control the technology, not the other way around. It's like they've found the sweet spot between rejecting modern convenience and embracing practical innovation. But having power is one thing. Getting around is another story entirely. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. When the fuel pumps run dry and electric cars become very expensive lawn ornaments, the Amish will still be on the move. Remember that last tank of gas seen in every apocalyptic movie? The one where people are fighting at empty gas stations like it's the last Black Friday sale ever? Well, here's a wild thought. The Amish are sitting back watching their horses munch on grass, completely unfazed by the fuel crisis unfolding around them. Transportation in a post-grid world isn't just about getting from point A to point B, it's about getting there reliably, day after day, without depending on complex supply chains or infrastructure. Your Tesla might be the epitome of modern engineering, but when the charging stations go dark, it's just an expensive piece of yard art. Even that trusty gas-powered car in your garage, it's got about 300 miles left in the tank before it becomes a really uncomfortable tiny house. The Amish, with their horse and buggy setup, have basically got a renewable transportation system grazing in their backyard. These aren't just any horses either. We're talking about carefully bred draft horses that can work all day without breaking a sweat. Your car might need premium gasoline, but their horses run on grass, hay, and the occasional apple. Talk about a sustainable fuel source. But here's where it gets really clever. And let's talk about those buggies for a second. They might look simple, but they're engineering marvels in their own right. Built to last decades with regular maintenance, these vehicles are the ultimate example of sustainable transportation. No planned obsolescence here, just solid craftsmanship that gets passed down through generations. The only emissions they produce? Well, let's just say it's organic, and the gardens love it, but we haven't even covered the most important part yet. Something everyone needs. The secret to Amish water independence lies hundreds of feet beneath their feet, and it's not a doomsday bunker. Their deep wells, often dug by hand or with horse-drawn equipment, tap into groundwater sources that would make modern preppers weep with joy, while the rest of us are stockpiling plastic water bottles that'll eventually leak chemicals into our drinking water. The Amish are pulling up fresh, clean water like they're running their own private utility company. Here's a mind-blowing fact. A properly constructed hand-dug well can last for generations. Some Amish communities are still using wells that their great-grandparents dug. And when something does break, they've got spare part systems that would make a NASA engineer jealous. You'd be amazed what you can fix with old bicycle parts and some ingenuity. While we're waiting for the plumber to show up in his computerized service van, they're already back in business with a bucket and some good old-fashioned elbow grease. But wells are just the beginning of their water wisdom. Take their rainwater harvesting systems. Simple, but brilliant. A typical Amish farm can collect up to 600 gallons of water from just 1 inch of rain falling on a 1,000 square foot roof. That's enough to fill 7.5 standard bathtubs, all from a single rainstorm. And they're not just catching it in rusty barrels. They've developed sophisticated filtering systems using sand, charcoal, and other natural materials that would make your Brita filter look like a child's science project. The real genius is in how they use every drop. That rainwater isn't just for drinking, it's carefully allocated for different purposes. The cleanest water goes to drinking and cooking. Slightly less filtered water handles the laundry and bathing, and the rest keeps the gardens growing and animals hydrated. It's like they're running a miniature water treatment plant, minus the massive energy bills and complicated infrastructure. Natural springs are their ace in the hole. These underground water sources provide mineral-rich, naturally filtered water that puts bottled spring water to shame. The best part? No electricity needed. The water flows year-round, powered by nothing but gravity and natural pressure. While city folks are fighting over the last case of bottled water at the supermarket, Amish families are filling their buckets with water that hasn't seen a chemical treatment plant in its life. Speaking of healthy living, there's another aspect of Amish life that might surprise you: their approach to medicine and staying healthy without relying on modern healthcare. When the hospitals are dark and pharmacies are empty, most of us wouldn't know the difference between a healing herb and a handful of weeds. But in Amish communities, that weed growing beside the barn might just be your next headache cure. Their medicine cabinet, it's their garden, and it's always open for business. The Amish approach to health is like having a built-in insurance policy that actually works. While we're popping pills for every minor ailment, they're preventing problems before they start. Their secret? A combination of hard work, clean eating, and herbal remedies that have stood the test of time. No copays required, and Mother Nature never sends you a bill. Take their use of elderberry, for example. When flu season hits, most of us are racing to the pharmacy for over-the-counter medicines. Meanwhile, Amish families are sipping elderberry syrup that they made months ago. Studies showed this little berry pack such a punch against viruses that modern pharmaceutical companies are trying to figure out how to bottle its power. The Amish just grow it, pick it, and turn it into medicine. Simple as that. Their herbal medicine chest reads like a gardener's greatest hits album. Got a stomachache? Peppermint tea, freshly picked. Can't sleep? Valerian root does the trick. That nasty cough keeping you up? A mixture of honey and homegrown thyme will quiet it down. These aren't just old wives' tales. Many of these remedies have been validated by modern science. The Amish were just a few hundred years ahead of the research papers, but it's not just about treating illness, it's about preventing it in the first place. Physical work keeps them naturally fit without needing a $100 monthly gym membership. Their diet is packed with fresh vegetables, whole grains, and fermented foods that keep their gut health in check. When's the last time you ate something that was picked the same day? For the Amish, it's just another Tuesday. They've even got their own version of physical therapy. Those aching muscles from a hard day's work, hot compresses and herbal salves made from arnica or comfrey do the job just fine. No need for expensive prescription pain medications when you've got nature's medicine growing in your backyard. But even with all these preventive measures and natural remedies, sometimes communities need protection from outside threats. And while the Amish are known for their peaceful ways, they've got some surprising skills that come in handy when times get tough. You could have all the food, water, and sustainable systems in the world, but none of it matters if you can't protect it when society breaks down. That's where most survival plans fall apart. They focus on stockpiling without thinking about security. The Amish? They've got something better than walls and weapons. They've got a community-based security system that's been working for centuries. Let's get one thing straight. Amish communities are deeply peaceful. They're not training for doomsday or plotting defense strategies. But hunting? That's a different story. Years of putting food on the table have made them some of the most skilled marksmen you'll ever meet. While the rest of us are learning to shoot from video games, they're teaching their kids the real-world skills of marksmanship, respect for weapons, and most importantly, when not to use them. Those hunting rifles they own aren't just any old guns either. We're talking about carefully maintained, top-quality equipment that gets passed down through generations. They treat these tools with the same respect they give everything else in their lives. No flashy collections or unnecessary accessories, just well-maintained instruments that serve a specific purpose. But here's where it gets really interesting. In a crisis, Amish communities become natural gathering points. Think about it. They've got food, water, sustainable power, and generations of practical knowledge. But when things go south, you will also have a lot of people that aren't going to be targeting Amish farms. They'll be trying to join forces with them. Their defensive strategy is simple but brilliant. Be so useful to everyone around you that hurting you would hurt themselves. While we're busy installing security systems and cameras that won't work without electricity, they're building relationships that will last through any crisis. Their farms don't just feed their families, they feed their English, non-Amish neighbors too. Their skills don't just serve their community, they benefit everyone around them. So maybe the biggest lesson we can learn from the Amish isn't about farming or food storage or even self-sufficiency. It's about building something that's truly sustainable, a community that's strong enough to weather any storm together.